thank you very much. So when I got this invitation, I thought, gosh, am I here slightly under false pretenses? I'm not an anthropologist. I am a philosopher. I have published on the philosophy of anthropology. I'm a follower of Peter Winch and Ludwig Wittgenstein. But then I thought, well, actually, it's really as someone who's been involved in Extinction Rebellion that I think I came to the attention of the organizers. Including through this book, my book, Extinction Rebellion, Insights from the Inside. And anyway, I then thought, well, we're talking here about applied anthropology, and certainly in that sense, my work is very applied. I've also published a little piece a few years ago in the journal Radical Anthropology, which was very applied. It was about the film Avatar in relation to anthropology. And then I thought also about the concept of anthropology itself, the study, the logos of the human, of the anthropos, and well, that is very much relevant to what I'm going to be talking about, as I hope will become evident. So hopefully I'm not here under false pretenses at all, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you all in Prague and around the world this morning. Yeah, so as I say, I was kindly invited to speak, especially because of my work with Extinction Rebellion. Extinction Rebellion, as I'm sure most of you will be well aware, international organization that's had success in various places around the world in the last few years with a much more full-on, direct naming of the problem of the planetary emergency that we are in. And full-on response to that with mass non-violent direct action, which in certain parts of the world, especially where we started, where I am here in the UK, has been very successful. It hasn't achieved its demands. It's achieved a modicum of each of its demands here in the UK Extinction Rebellion. For example, the Parliament, after our first full-on rebellion in May 2019, declared a symbolic climate and environment emergency. But it has been successful in that kind of regard, and also more broadly in moving public opinion and in raising climate consciousness. And I think it's fair to say that Extinction Rebellion, combined with the school strikes for climate, have made a huge difference, especially in the global north, in the level of consciousness of the climate and ecological emergency, and in moving public opinion on that. And that's a very real success, an unusual success, a success that was very necessary in and of our time, a success that I think was made possible by the appalling nature of our time. I'm referring especially to the way that our climate, our weather is, as we speak, spinning out of control, which is just, well, terrifying. So a question might be, what next? Again, that was partly, I think, why I was invited to speak, because I have a bit of an idea about what next. Extinction Rebellion may well have a continuing role to play. So may Fridays for Future, and that would be great. But I myself and a number of other people who have been prominently involved in XR have sort of moved on and are trying to do something new. What are we trying to do? Well, it's striking that many of us are trying to do, who have sort of moved on from XR, are trying to do roughly the same thing. What we're trying to do, as I see it, is to exploit the space that has been opened up by Extinction Rebellion and by Greta Thunberg et al. The space that's been opened up by way of the change of public consciousness that has been effected to some extent or another, to a lesser or greater extent in, as I say, especially a number of countries in the global north. A space has been opened up which wasn't there before, and it may be that the most important effect of Extinction Rebellion, considered as in movement scholarship terms a radical flank, which is what Extinction Rebellion deliberately tried to be, a way of shifting the Overton window of what's politically possible, a way of making it easier for more moderate forces to be seen as plausible, as simply commonsensical in their demands. That this space that has been opened up, it may be that the most important thing that Extinction Rebellion has co-created is that space which may be for others to enter into. And that's what I call the moderate flank. And that's what I see happening, and that's what I want to see more of, and what I think could be hugely significant and influential in the next few years. The moderate flank is what the radical flank has made possible. And the moderate flank could exist between, on the one hand, mass nonviolent direct action and the kind of methods of XR and the school strikers, and on the other hand, conventional approaches of consumer activism, lobbying, marches, etc. What is this space in between those two? What am I referring to there? Well, if you think about that space in terms of methods, there are many possibilities here, but I'd like to draw particular attention to the following two. Firstly, workplace-based activism, doing serious stuff in our workplaces to move the dial a lot further in terms of what actually happens, what businesses, what institutions, what people working in offices for government, what all of these places do, how they operate. And I'm referring here from everything to everything from how people commute, or whether people commute, to what the supply chains are, to what kinds of lobbying the businesses undertake. Do they lobby to create more loopholes and create more profits for themselves, or do they lobby for a higher playing field for everybody? Do they lobby for climate action? All the way to what is the product of these institutions or businesses? What are they actually trying to bring to the world? Enormous scope here for potential change for the better or for the worse, if that change for the better isn't done. And this is a positive way in which I expect to see a lot of change being leveraged in the next few years. A little example here would be a new organization called Lawyers for Net Zero. This is lawyers who are working in-house to use the law to make zero emissions more probable. And I think this is an organization which is likely to be quite successful over the next few years. And it's just one example. And then, of course, talking of workplaces, we might also think, if this positive kind of approach doesn't work, of turning towards a more negative approach of withdrawing of labor, which is perhaps something that a larger number of people would be willing to do than have been willing to risk arrest in mass nonviolent direct action. Because obviously one of the sort of parameters that I'm dealing with here is the fact that it does seem as though there is a limit to the number of people who are willing to get involved in organizations like Extinction Rebellion. And we somehow need a much larger number of people to get involved and to do serious stuff that will be going beyond conventional methods, which didn't get us far enough. So that's where I'm seeing the scope for what I'm calling the moderate flank. So, as I say, if our children are willing to go on strike, and they've shown that they are, then surely we should be willing to do so too. And I think that workplace-based activism of a positive kind, and if necessary of that negative kind, will be and should be a big force for change in the coming years. And secondly, my other example would be even more direct attempts to achieve the kind of positive change that we need to see in the world, to achieve what I call transformative adaptation. I'm following the UN here, adapting to the climate damage that is here and that is baked in a way that is transformative, in a way that makes our societies better rather than worse. So a very obvious example here would be more people getting involved in food growing. This has been happening for years, of course, with things like permaculture and the transition towns movement, but I see more scope for it in the next few years, more potentiality for it to be deliberately framed in relation to the worsening climate and weather, and more potentiality for it to learn from organizations like Extinction Rebellion. If you have, for example, landless people occupying land and growing food on it, they could be defended in that positive task, if necessary, by nonviolent direct action. So this kind of adaptation-based, perhaps food-based positive action, it wouldn't be protest, it wouldn't be seeking to get arrested in the way that Extinction Rebellion has done so, but it would be prepared to use the tools of nonviolent direct action if and where necessary to defend those positive goals. Okay, so a couple of examples there of what the moderate flank might consist in: workplace-based and adaptation-based action. On what basis do I see this action happening? How would people be thinking of themselves as they engage in this action? Would they, for example, be thinking of themselves as members of an oppressed group or oppressed class? Would they be thinking of themselves as climate justice activists? Well, maybe. I'm sure that some of them would. But what I'm also interested in terms of a possibility for this much larger mobilization that I'm envisaging, this so-called moderate flank, is for the mobilization to be on a broader basis, to be on the basis of an attempt to achieve a broader unity, to form a broader we, and to be less polarizing than Extinction Rebellion has been. So let me give 3 very quick examples of what this might mean. Firstly, there are a number of, certainly in the UK, there are a number of sort of spin-offs from Extinction Rebellion, which have this kind of nature. One example would be an organization called Trust the People, which is trying to do the same kind of thing as Extinction Rebellion, but to do it in a more consensual way, to do it more on the basis of people's assemblies and citizens' assemblies. Second example, our identity as parents of the future. This is something which most adults have in the literal sense, and those of us such as myself who are not literally parents, well, we're all, I take it, really co-parenting the future. In our identity as parents of the future, which is extremely widely shared, we can, I think, find a unity, something profoundly in common, something intrinsic to our nature as mammals, as primates, as humans, which could bring us together, because our children's future is now absolutely direly threatened. And the traditional way that parents have been able to look after their children by getting them a good education and feeding them well and so on, that's not going to be enough, tragically, in the historical moment that we are now in. If there is to be a decent future for our children, it's going to have to come from us as parents, or as parents of the future, acting collectively at a much more systemic level to co-create that future. And I think that is possible. I think it is entirely possible that you will see a much larger upswelling of parents, just as we have seen an upswelling of children in recent years. And my third example is quite simply going even beyond that, thinking of us all being in this together, thinking of us being humans, the anthropos in the Anthropocene. Is it possible that rather than thinking of ourselves as having any kind of sectional identity, we could think of ourselves under this heading, facing this awesome, unprecedented planetary crisis that we face? Well, I think it is possible, or certainly at least, I think it's more possible than has so far yet occurred. Now, what's interesting, those of you who are aware of the kind of theoretical approach of Extinction Rebellion will recognize that some of this was actually supposed to be an Extinction Rebellion's approach anyway, an attempt to be broadly based, to not be based on one particular political ideology, an attempt to appeal to us broadly as human beings who are in an emergency. And I think this is one of the splendid aspects of Extinction Rebellion, but it has been lost a bit over the last 12 to 18 months in Extinction Rebellion. There's been a bit of a drift towards sectionalism. There's been a bit of a drift towards an adherence to contemporary identity politics and the theory of intersectionality. And I speak here as a skeptic of those, as someone who thinks that those tend not to divide us, but actually to sectionalize us and divide us, not to unite us. If we're going to be truly inclusive in relation to the crisis that we face, then we're going to have to look beyond the mantras that many of us are used to of how to do inclusion. Intersectionality and the standard ways of doing inclusion in recent years are arguably not inclusive. They're not inclusive of people who don't understand the jargon. They're not inclusive of people who identify on the political center, let alone the political right. They're not inclusive of people who are skeptics of wokeism. We need to be, as one might put it, meta-inclusive. We need to include people who are not included by traditional ways of doing inclusion by way of including marginalized groups. And this is really the point at which I wish to end. The moderate flank that I'm envisaging would try to unite people in ways that go beyond the ways that we've been taught, I think, in recent years, especially in the academy, to unite people. It would be truly inclusive. It would be meta-inclusive. And that is the way it could actually achieve this broader-based approach. Now, am I saying that according to this moderate flank approach, we won't talk anymore about, say, climate justice? No, I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that an approach that only approaches these issues through the frame of climate justice is likely to be insufficiently inclusive. Because, well, firstly, it's not just the climate, of course, that we're concerned with, but secondly, and more importantly, even justice is not a broad enough frame, actually. Justice is not a way that many ordinary people think of their fundamental concerns. Justice does not articulate very well the kind of attitude we need to have towards nature. It doesn't articulate very well the kind of activities that people are doing if they're, for example, growing food for themselves. It doesn't even articulate fully some of the kinds of things that people would be trying to do if they're trying to achieve positive change through their workplace. So what I'm trying to suggest is that the moderate flank that could come after and be perhaps even more successful than Extinction Rebellion has been, has to take even more seriously than Extinction Rebellion does, the need to be broader based and the need to look for a way of being inclusive that takes us outside our comfort zones, including even outside excellent concepts such as climate justice. And that's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much for listening. I look forward to your questions.